Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast, where we discuss technology and finance, and that usually revolves around Bitcoin, crypto, and some blockchain. Please make sure that you're subscribed to us on our various podcast channels, as well as on our social at TF Blockchain, and I'm at JG Product. I'm excited for my next guest, Joe Vezzani. He is the founder and CEO of Lunar Crush. They're doing some interesting things when it comes to how one analyzes a cryptocurrency based off of what people are saying. And so we'll let him talk a little bit more about that. And Joe, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself to everybody.
For sure. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, man. So yeah, Lunar Crush, social listening for crypto is what we call it. And, you know, when we first started, I got introduced to crypto by, from my co-founder back in 2015. And he was in it for a couple of years before me. And it was all about, how do you really assess the value of these cryptos? At the time it was Bitcoin, but it was, as other stuff started to come online, we were looking at it and it's like, there are no earnings reports, there's no management, there's nothing. It's like, it's all about supply and demand. What are people saying? And so when we tried to find new things to invest in, and when, altcoins kind of came on the scene, it was like, you're looking at your Twitter feed, you're looking at Reddit, you're looking at some news articles that come out here and there, and some of them are biased and some of them are not. And so we wanted to see the whole picture of what the market was saying from a social perspective. And we thought that was our thesis, was that would drive price and that would drive the market. And so we started aggregating crypto specific data from across the web. And, we kind of see ourselves as a UX and product driven company. And we wanted to visualize all of the data. We now have over 250 million pieces of data in our database.
Wow.
That's crypto specific social data. And so we just wanted to visualize it and help ourselves. And, here we are now helping, investors make better decisions.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Before we go into that, there's similar things in that vein outside of crypto markets, right? I guess measuring sentiment or analysis or things like analyzing what people think, right? But I've definitely never seen that in a crypto function besides you guys.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to figure out. When we first started getting into it, it was like, we found different services out there that they were like, hey, we're crypto news, and so we pulled that in, and they basically would just call all of Reddit news. And so you didn't really get, a good feel for, is the sentiment up? Is there more than there was last week, yesterday, the year before? What does this look like? Is the market growing? Is the community around each of these projects growing? And so, like I was kind of mentioning, this works more for crypto, the sentiment, there's more supply and demand, there's more people, where in the kind of traditional marketplace, it's not like, I think we were kind of mentioning before, like, with JP Morgan, no one's going to go and say, hey, JP Morgan was wrecked today, REKT, or hey, Bank of America is about to moon, or like, they just don't say these things. And so, we wanted to look at the crypto specific data, and it's like there's a lot of it, and this is what kind of drives our market versus put out earnings guidance, and if they beat those earnings guidance over time, usually that's what pushes up an equity or a stock up over time.
Yeah, definitely. So give us a kind of a understanding of that. How does that work? So you are looking for those types of words. You probably input some crypto vernacular, I guess, into your processing and how you think about it. How would that go? How would one go about using that with your product?
Yeah, so we're looking at keywords, we're looking at tickers, we're looking at URLs, we're looking at anything that has any sort of crypto specific mention in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we pull that data down, we're organizing it, we're cleaning it. We use some machine learning to identify, like I was saying, sentiment. And then we break it down by project, so there's, over 1,500 projects that we have on the site now that have some social data, have price data, where people can go and identify whether or not, is there a community behind this project? Are they growing? Are they shrinking? Are there more people talking about it? Are there more people bullish on it or bearish on it? And what does that look like? Maybe who are some of the people that are influential on that project? Can I follow them on Twitter? Can I learn a little bit more? And so we wanted to break it down by each project because there are so many kind of niche communities within crypto.
Yeah, definitely. There are tons of niche communities and factions and,
Yeah, very
you know,
tribal.
yeah, very, very tribal. Exactly. And so, I guess with that, when you're, the way the algorithm works is, do you take those sort of things into account? Right. So I'm assuming like there's probably some level of formula, like based off how, how many followers someone has, that might mean more than if, a new account creates it. Do you take those sort of things into account?
We do when identifying who is influential over a project or not. So we have like a little influencers list, and you can see who's the most influential. And it really that comes down to a couple things. It comes down to engagement. So if you're actually getting engagement on your account and you're posting, your frequency is relatively high, then you're going to probably rank a lot higher. If it's
Hmm.
we don't do it just by kind of impression data, because there's some really large accounts like a Reuters or a Forbes, and if they tweet or post on a news URL that mentions Bitcoin, they're gonna get a lot of impressions, but it doesn't mean that they had a lot of engagement and influence on that.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of thing that we're looking at, is engagement. As far as just kind of pure data that comes onto lunarcrush.com by project, I mean, we're just pulling everything in. So if we do look for spam. So we're looking for things like, does it have a million tickers on it? Has it been tweeted out, or has it been, upvoted by a bunch of kind of ghost accounts that don't have a lot of followers per se? Like some of those things, actually pretty easy to identify spam at this point. But some of the
Sure.
other stuff is a little tougher.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yesterday was the Bitcoin halving, the Super Bowl of sorts in Bitcoin. And so there's definitely a lot of attention, right? I'm sure Bitcoin halving probably was, I know it was trending, or some version of that was trending. So I'm guessing that was really leading up. I'm curious, like, what did you learn, throughout these last couple of weeks as we kind of started leading towards that?
Yeah, we put out a nice infographic that talked a little bit about the halving and the amount of mentions that were actually out there, and it was all the way up until yesterday. It was just going crazy, and it was even to a point where it was trending, on Twitter, above some of the other major news stories that have been going on. It's very tough. It's been a little bit easier now, but it was always very tough for anyone to break through, coronavirus, trending topics and news and
Yeah.
everything. But we saw a huge increase. I mean, we're running the numbers back even further to take another look, because we want to look at it halving over halving and see how kind of the engagement has pulled up. But that data is pretty old and a little bit tougher to get to. But we want to do some more of that stuff. But we put a cool little infographic out that really kind of showed that there's more people talking about it, even though leading up to it, there was still a lot of engagement and impressions around just the term Bitcoin and halving. There's more people, more contributors now talking about it than there were before.
Yeah.
So we just released a new metric called social contributors, and that's basically, is it a unique person coming online, kind of like a unique wallet almost.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, who's your customer? Like, who is this all for? Right. And like, is it for just the average consumer that's kind of just overall interested in it? Or is there, I'm assuming there'd be some, bigger type companies that would be really interested in this kind of data for decision-making processes, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both right now. I mean, we have a developer portal where, we have an API that, we have exchanges using it. We've got, a WebSocket that has real-time data that we built out, and that's more for kind of a high frequency trader or hedge fund that might want, social data kind of coming in quickly, because we could really start to tease out some of the data like more quickly than, it's like, so for instance, there's a good example. It was a while ago. I think it was BAT. It was basic attention token. Um, and they had a release or a browser release or something big kind of come out, and they released it. It wasn't a big press release. It was, I think, something small. And it's like, when the community starts talking about something really rapidly, you're going to see things like social engagement just skyrocket. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking, maybe there's an average of 5,000 engagements. That means like upvotes, retweets, comments, likes on, a mid-size altcoin. Just that's kind of like the norm. And then if something big happens, that'll shoot to like millions of engagements in 1 hour. And so it's almost like an alert or a trigger that notifies you that
There's going to
something
be
big is
some,
happening.
yeah,
And so we've got some sort of big news, something, and it's gonna sniff it out a little bit faster than you'd probably see in the news, or it hits the wire or something like that. And so we have people that use that data to trade. But then we also, we have a great just regular investor community. We have people that can come onto Lunar Crush for free and see the data, see the social analytics that are out there. And so we want to serve both markets because we built this mainly for just the regular investor to protect people against kind of scammy stuff, people that don't
mm,
have communities. You don't want people putting money. It doesn't help the community and the crypto space in general. If you've got a bunch of people investing in what their friend told them to invest in, lose all their
totally,
money like 2017 and say, I'm never coming back to that.
right.
We wanted to protect people against that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and definitely needed and interested. And from what you're saying, it sounds like, yeah, as there's more attention towards something, and there's essentially, I guess, a spike in that social activity, there most likely is some reflection in price, whether that be up or down.
Right, exactly. Whether to be up or down is a good thing you said right there, because sometimes it's something that's bearish, something bad happened. And so
Hmm.
it's just, it's like everyone talks about, as far as community goes, you need to look at like GitHub commits and all of these other things that are out there, wallet size, who's in the money, who's out of the money, on-chain analytics. As this alternative data comes online for crypto, social data is just something that as an investor, you just need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, yeah, especially too because the authenticity of the community itself. I remember back in 2017, everybody felt that they had to have these big Telegram communities, if you remember,
Right.
right? And like, so like investors would actually ask people how big their Telegram community was, right? And like, which is the stupidest thing. And so people would just get bots, get these Telegram bots, or like these, people would go from like 0 Telegram group to 10,000 in a couple days over nothing. So it's super interesting. I'd love to touch on that element, from the bots and the, call it like fake accounts and those sort of things. Like, first, there's obvious reasons as to why people kind of think about doing that in the sense of like the vanity metric or whatever. But, I guess, what are your thoughts overall on how people use that? And then how easy is it to sniff out now versus how it might have been a few years ago?
With regards to like something like a Telegram, or just in
Just
general?
in general, just like, yeah, bots and because people accuse others of bots often, and like usually you can see like low levels of engagement. They might have high followers or high amounts of contacts or whatever, but then the engagement is really low, so that might be an indicator of a bot. Or I had someone one time retweeted me, retweeted something that they were in with me, and all of a sudden he gets, I don't know, something like 40 retweets. I was like, holy shit, like this guy has a ton of folks. And then I click on him and none of them have faces, and it's like banned accounts. And it was like Twitter picked up on it right away. I was like, oh,
Oh
great.
yeah.
I was like, great. So it's just, I don't know, I think it's really interesting overall, and everything has obviously gotten a lot easier, or not, I shouldn't say easier, more sophisticated in sniffing out some of that sort of thing.
Yeah, it has. And it's like you were saying, it's a little bit easier to fake kind of volume, just unique data. So like unique posts on something, but it's almost impossible to fake engagement
Mm-hmm.
on like a pure level of, hey, this got retweets and comments, and it's by all of these and all these legitimate accounts, because it's also very simple to figure out for us. Like if we see a URL and because we'll go to that URL, we'll go to it, we'll spider it, we'll look at the whole thing. And so it's like when we see a URL that's being tweeted out a ton, and then we can also see the accounts associated with that, and whether or not they actually have, like you're saying, a lot of followers or a lot of engagement. What you can actually end up doing is scoring and categorizing each account, and give that person potentially a higher level of competency that they're a legitimate contributor to the crypto sphere or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have kind of a unique way of kind of parsing out whether it's real or whether it's not. And I think that's kind of what our community likes about us, is that when they land on our site, for the most part on a lot of the big projects, we've kind of sniffed that out, and we help them really parse through spam or not spam. But
Yeah.
there's still, I would say that if you were going to say, hey, is spam higher now versus when it was back in 2017, I would say there's still plenty of spam. And that's just a way that people think works for them, and it's a way that they try to get their message out, and they create accounts. And, it's like things like Twitter, you can't just stop people from making accounts. You just have to kind of parse out the community once it gets live.
Yeah, totally. So you're a founder, and one of the things I always love to just talk about when I get founders on the show is just being a founder. And so, I'm curious, have you guys raised capital for this venture, or is it self-funded? And, just tell us kind of more like that founder journey element.
Yeah, no, I mean, we started, like, my co-founder and I kind of started kicking this around even back in like 2015. We were just like, we need to do something. What is it going to be? Once we found Bitcoin, just like a lot of other people, it's like this intersection between technology and finance and decentralization. And there's just so much there that it was like, we need to do something. And so, like a lot of people, we were those people where, everyone's like, hey man, what do I buy? What do I do? What's Tron? And it's like, you want to give advice and help them. And we're like, well, should we do some sort of like consulting thing around this? And we were both working full time, and I'd worked for financial advisors before. And I was like, yeah, I don't think we should there's no financial advice. There's no consulting thing. I said, let's build something in this space. And that's how you become an expert. Let's build a product, let's be a part of it. And so that's kind of where the idea of Lunar Crush came from, is our just dealing with what we were going through. And we brought on a couple other co-founders and started building it out, and said, can we even do this? And once we figured out that we could, it was probably April of last year of 2019 when we launched kind of the first beta. And we launched it at the Crypto Invest Summit here in Los Angeles, and had just a little booth. And at the time, the guys that ran that conference, Alon Gorn and Joseph Holm, they actually who they're now our investors, and I can kind of get to that, but they just they said, hey, come on by, check out, the space and everything else. So we got a booth there, and that was really kind of the launching party of Lunar Crush. And, we self-funded and built everything up until July of last year. We actually joined a Techstars accelerator.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so Techstars is, I would say it's like Y Combinator, Techstars are the kind of the two.
Yeah.
YC is very focused in SF, and it's kind of the premier, but Techstars is very global.
Which city were you at for Techstars?
Los Angeles.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we did that from July till about October of 2019. Amazing experience. This is the second time I've gone through a Techstars accelerator. I did one back in 2014. So I think there's only a handful of people that have done that, but obviously it speaks kind of volumes on going through it twice. And then, go for it.
I was gonna say, I'm curious what the investor outlook or thoughts have been on what you're doing, right? Just because of call it lack of awareness by most traditional investors, of course, when it comes to something cryptocurrency. Like, they might be afraid of it, or think it's not real or whatever. What did you experience from on that aspect of things when talking with investors? And you can probably even parse it out, like your quote unquote traditional investor versus someone like Alon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're definitely right. There are more traditional, and it's funny that we call it like, someone could be investing in, AR and some of the craziest stuff, but I still kind of bunched them into traditional investor as well.
Yeah.
My spreadsheet. And it was, I found out very early on that if you're raising money in the crypto space, it's like, you can't even speak to someone that has not invested into it before.
Right.
Maybe from an angel perspective, yes, there are some people, but some of these angels, a lot of angel investors come in based on their relationship with you or the relationship with the founder, and they believe in you and your ability, especially at the pre-seed to seed stage, probably more pre-seed. But we started talking to a lot of traditional investors, and it was very quickly where we like, hey, this isn't going to work, because you can go in there and, like, we're all in this community and we've been in it for 10 years, and they're shooting satellites into space to keep the Bitcoin network going. And people would be like, hey, I thought this was like dead. Like, I thought like, it was just going away or it wasn't happening. And so, my co-founder and I always kind of joke, like, like billionaires buying in, coming into space. Like, I thought this was just going away. Like, I thought it's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
but it's not a, I couldn't, at the beginning, I was a little frustrated with it because I was like, how are you guys missing this? But then you find out very quickly with venture capitalists that they have a thesis, they have an investment criteria. They've, already basically sold off to all of their LPs what that is and the market that they're going to go after and how they want to invest. And so they aren't going to just break that, because you've got a crypto company and you've got like some decent traction. So
Right.
I think it's like learning that and finding the people in this space that make sense for you. And it's all about, finding good, smart people that understand founders. Like it would be very difficult for me at this point, I think, to at least at this stage, take money from a VC and have someone on my board that, hasn't run or attempted to run a company before and started from scratch, because they're so far removed from like the day-to-day of what you're going through.
Totally.
So, it's like the VCs have so many knocks on us as founders and what they can do. That's like, we get one back, and the one back that we get is like, hey, if you haven't founded something before, like I just can't take money from you.
Yeah, no, I don't blame that sentiment at all, because especially, if they're going to have a board seat and telling you how to run the company, I totally see that point of view, unless it's like they have incredible domain expertise in what you're doing. Right. And that's like a different scenario, right? Because they're adding that type of value, right? Like if you're an e-commerce tech company and like they founded Shopify, or like they were on Shopify's board or something like that or whatever, so I totally get that. It's interesting because I'm a founder myself, and a lot of times I think that when people go through that first time of founding a company or talking with investors, it's like you kind of learn it as you go, like you're kind of talking about, right? And at first you might think that everything that the investor says is the right thing, and then you start to realize, like, wait a second, there are frankly different strokes for different folks. People do have different theses, like you explained there. So I think that's like the biggest mistake most founders make at first, is not knowing who they should actually be going after, and then like listening for the no quicker than what they thought, right? Like they might try to convince that investor that just doesn't have to be a part of the thesis, and that's like, you're not going to be successful on that.
I would say, as for a founder, if you get into a meeting and you can tell it's not going well, you don't need to convince that person.
Right.
That's why I kind of like the Zoom economy that we're in now, because you don't have to waste, drive, especially around the Los Angeles area. It's like driving 40 minutes, parking. The VC makes you pay $28 for parking. It's like, you're like, dude, I'm on, this is like self-funded shoestring. A good one that came through is talking to a couple of younger people that were advising and trying to help us out. And my favorite one was like Sales Playbook. I don't know if you've heard about that one, where it's like,
no.
It was all like, hey, you guys need a sales playbook. You need to have this identified, figure out how you're going to sell this, and that's how you're going to repeat it, and that's how you're going to sell it. And then I had this kind of old salty founder, talk to me, and he was just like, sales playbook. He's like, if you know how to fucking sell it, you'd be selling it. He was just like, you're figuring it out. You don't know yet. Like all you know is you're testing the waters, and you're talking to different people, and you're trying to do it. And so, sometimes it's also good to talk to folks who are a little bit older that have been through it, and maybe even like close to retirement age, that have gone through some stuff, because they kind of come back down to earth of like, man, it's tough. Like it's not easy. And there's personal stuff, and there's work stuff, and there's people involved. And it's like, every day is the best day and the worst day of your life, over and over and over and over again. And if you're not prepared for that, then you might not, this isn't for you type thing. So
totally. And what's interesting about that is that, the way you kind of act throughout your daily life changes a little bit when you have that realization. And I guess what I mean by that is that, if you're a founder and you're working your ass off and you're trying to figure something out, it's hard to maintain relationships probably with people that don't do that, right? Or like aren't in that mindset. And it's nothing against someone that isn't in that mindset. It's just that, like, as you're saying, is like, you're so focused, it's, you want to spend time talking to someone else that's gone through that same thing, or, understands that. So I totally get what you're saying there.
I think it's quickness. It's a lot of times people think it's going to happen a lot faster than it actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And The example I like to give is something like Uber, where it's like they were probably thinking about that in 2006, '07. Like they launched somewhere in '08, '09. I don't even remember when. And it's in San Francisco a little bit, but it was like, people like my dad weren't talking about it till like 2013,
Hmm.
And so even though they had some nice early traction in those first years, it didn't really become this big thing for like 5 years. And that was really more like 7 when they started thinking about it. And it's like,
Totally.
that's a long ass journey. And so it's like, people don't realize where it's like, you can't be full bore. And this is what I kind of learned the second time over going and doing this. The first time was, you just have to live every day, and you have to be calm, and you just have to know that there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, and you
Hmm.
just try to string more good days together than there are bad days. But you can't get so worked up where it's like, oh my god, is this going to work, is it not going to work, what's going to happen? Because you're just going to get depressed, you're going to blow yourself out, and not be able to sustain that longer term effort that it's going to need to get to the final place that you're looking for.
Right. Yeah. Overnight success stories don't happen overnight. Well, I'm
Just a
curious.
lot.
What was the first company that you took through TechStars? Like, what was
um,
what was the space?
Yeah, it was personal safety. So it was a personal safety app. I was more like a junior founder in that company, with a couple other teammates, and we went through the Kansas City powered by Sprint TechStars Accelerator
Uh,
2014. And it was a very simple design. It was hold your finger down on the screen of the phone. If someone grabs you, attacks you, something happens, your finger is obviously going to come off. Like, and you remember those like blue lights on campuses and stuff, like you're not
yeah.
getting there. So it was like the finger comes off, immediately, loud noise, flashing light happens. And then it was kind of geofenced, and it contacted the closest public safety answering point, so the police would know exactly where you are in your latitude and longitude. So it's kind of like a home alarm,
Yeah.
for wherever you're at. So
Nice.
um, yeah, no, great product.
Yeah. Very cool. So curious, is your background kind of on the product side of things too?
It's kind of been all over the place, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I learned a lot about product in that first startup. So it was, but I came out of school with in '08 with like a finance degree. I came
Mm,
out when shit was hitting the fan, and I wanted to go work for Lehman Brothers, and I was going to go do investment banking. That's what everyone did. And, very quickly found out that, they don't exist anymore. And I needed to figure something else out. And I actually found advertising, kind of randomly. There was a financial analyst position at a decent, like, big agency in Chicago. That's where I'm from. Went to work in like the general ledger side of finance, like, proverbial, almost like mailroom.
yeah.
But actually ended up really loving that industry. It's a super fun, exciting industry, and learned about clients and everything else. And just was always very just inquisitive and curious, and just always tried to rotate around and do different things, and learned a little bit about production and digital production, and radio commercials, TV commercials. And as a finance person, I was just like a different type of person in that environment, and that I think
Yeah.
helped out. And um, so did some sales. I
Yeah.
worked for like a building manufacturer company called Owens Corning, and I learned a ton about pricing and channel management and sales management. And it was a great job where I got to travel California, Nevada, Hawaii. So I did a
Nice.
lot along the way, and then started the other startup, and off to the races. I've always been an entrepreneur, and I needed to do something, and needed to do something on my own. And so it was always like, what can I do? What can I build? And I really didn't even almost care what it was until, I found crypto, and then it was like, this is it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, being that you came out of school in 2008, wanting to be a finance, wanting to work for Lehman's, I'm assuming you have some interesting, points of view when it comes to that, financial crisis to what's been recently happening, overall. Love kind of just like your outlook on, call it March 12th. And then, where we're at now, like, is everything all inflated? Is this fake? Are we, what is this? What is this? What does the Twitter data tell us, or, about what's happening in the world right now financially?
Yeah, I think the weird thing about this one is a lot of people understand that it's inflated. A lot of
Hmm.
people know that. And so it's like, obviously it's inflated because the government has printed so much money, and they've said, hey, we're going to backstop any company, we're going to buy any bond. We're going to start buying bond ETFs even, because this is no one's fault, and we're going to back up the economy. And there's a piece to that I 100% agree with, that it's nobody's fault, right? The other piece though is that we've come up with this pattern now, and it started back in 2008. It took them a little bit longer to get that bailout package done. And they were, that's a completely different crisis. Like, my God, like I can go into that for hours about,
Yeah.
The mortgage market and what people were selling people. I mean, even in high school, I was working at a mortgage office, and I remember when someone came out and they're like, hey, we got this new product. It's called the CISA loan, stated income, stated asset. You just have to say what you have and say what you make. And even then at like 16 or 17, I was like, this can't be right. Like, there's something wrong. Like, I can just go online and like tap up the like maximum credit card thing and say I make, $1 million a year. And now I have a $50,000 credit line for literally no reason. So that was I think it was a different crisis. I think it's still TBD how deep this one will cut versus that one. I think when it comes to people's homes, and there's a lot of value locked up in that, and there's a lot of psychological value that's locked up in that as well, versus something that's happening today where people really probably haven't lost as much of their housing yet, because they've allowed people to kind of move those payments out, and they've said they're going to backstop stuff. But I have a feeling that this potentially could get much, much worse going into the next couple of months, because how much longer can we print our way out of it? I mean, are we just going to say we're going to do it forever? What if an entire sector, like what if transportation, what if 5 airlines go out of business and the other airlines don't see an uptick for years? Like, what do you do? Like, I don't think we have enough data, I think, to understand that yet. But I think the airlines are going to be in a weird spot, because the majority of their revenue is coming from these business travelers. And now that you and I are doing this, and a lot of people are going to be doing this, not as many people are probably going to be paying $5,000 to $8,000 for international tickets, or $800 to $5,000 for cross.
Right. Yeah. We've discovered that we can survive in this context, and sure, we might want to shake hands, but we can still, get past most of the elements just like this, right? Like, why would you pay that much money to travel? And not just the money, but the time and the energy and so forth. I totally know what you mean on that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. It's funny. It's funny. I've been joking about with the airlines themselves. It's like, so they get a bailout, but people are still paying for bags or over bag fees or things like that, right? And jokes aside, is that I know like there's been actual people that work for the airline industries that like have been laid off, or have some of that money that was intended to go to either like help supporting or supplementing the wages hasn't, things like that. So I think you're totally right. It's definitely interesting, definitely different than 2008, for good and bad reasons. And I think the other thing that's really interesting and kind of scary is the unemployment numbers, right? When you start thinking about that, we're going to be over 30% this week likely, and so now we're approaching close to 10%, but of the country being unemployed, and it'll probably be much more than that. Some people have said it could be as high as like 25% unemployment, which is insane. And that means people buy less. And so so when you see the stock market rebound in this way, and like we haven't seen Q2 numbers, people are in fact spending less, and it feels inflated.
Yeah, I mean, it's like how much, because it's really a lot of the tech stocks is what's driving a lot of this. And it's FANG, it's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. They're driving it, but it's when you even look at those companies, it's like, well, Netflix now has a lot more competition. Things like Disney, people are just on their computers, they're on Twitch, they're on all these other things. They're all vying for attention. And if you look at Google, it's like, are people really going to be spending as much on ads as they were over the next year? I mean, maybe some of that television budget kind of moves into digital, but are they going to capture all of it? Mm-hmm. And then, Facebook, same thing. And it's like, how big can Amazon really be, right? Like, people are even now, because Amazon's taking so long to deliver, they're going back to Best Buy and buying stuff. It's like, whoa, I never didn't think I was going to buy anything from Best Buy ever again. And so I think it's a weird thing, because those stocks are now 30% of the market cap of the S&P 500, something silly like that. And then they're also 30% of the trading volume. I mean, people give Bitcoin shit because it's like, hey, it's 60% of the market cap. Like, it's the only thing. Like, what about like none of this other stuff? And it's too small. It's like, well, you're telling me the entire U.S. economy is about only 30% of it's written on these other 5 companies. So I think there's a huge disconnect, and it's like, how big can Apple really get, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, people just keep dumping money into these tech stocks. They think it's the future, and I just don't know if it's sustainable based on the earnings and based on, I mean, these airlines are putting up zeros, and Apple's going to take a hit. Some of these companies are going to take earnings hits, but it's almost like the market doesn't care. They just know that there's trillions of dollars of backstop, and they're just going to keep going. But I mean, I was wrong. Hourly, I was wrong. I was started shorting like much earlier than I probably should have. And I was wrong, and I didn't think it could run that far, but it did, because of the amount of backstop. But there's a lot of people unemployed, and consumer spending is a huge portion of GDP, and I just don't see consumer spending the way that they have been spending for much longer.
Yeah. Well, I think like a good analogy of all this too is, a lot of people that like sports, right? And so I was listening to something or watching something about the NBA, and they were talking about how like the NBA is going to have to significantly reduce salaries or renegotiate with players. And it's interesting because it's like a new CBA, which is their contract for the association. But what they were saying that I thought was really interesting that you can put across to every single market is that they're like, what people don't realize is 40% of the revenue that comes into the NBA is from games, like people going to the actual game, and like everything like that's revolved around that. Like, and so it's like, holy cow, when you think about it. And so in that perspective, because you imagine an arena, right? And you imagine like that. And so you take that across every single industry, and it's like, there's ways that a lot of these companies, were in fact getting revenue. And as much as we want to say like, well, that's going online, people are frankly just spending less, like there's like, I don't spend on gas, cars, none of that kind of stuff. And yeah, we eat at home all the time. Like, we actually haven't been doing takeout or anything like that. So, been learning how to cook a couple things. I've had to buy a couple like staples that like kind of like serve the like the feel that I want. Like, so I like tartar sauce and I like French fries. That's nothing I would ever have at home. But like, if I go and I eat a burger at a restaurant, I'll be like, hey, can I have, a side of tartar sauce with the fries? So we learned how to make like wedge cut fries, and like, they're awesome. Right. And so I was like, well, let's get some tartar sauce. Anyways,
Yeah.
just a silly example of like, people have resolve and, kind of figure it out. And so if they have the resolve to figure out how they're going to do things on their own, what does that mean for business? How does business change? How does it evolve? How do our habits change? All that.
Yeah, and it's good, and you're learning new things, and I think everyone needs to learn new things. And I'm learning new things all the time. Learning, my wife's learning how to cut my hair, right? And she feels like she screws up. I'm like, you're doing a pretty good job. I mean, like, and you learn all these new things, and I think the rest of it, like, everyone in this economy needs to learn those things. And it's like, everyone's like, hey, let's get back to work. Let's get back to work. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, I think the people that are currently at work are going to be people that are going to be working into the future. And the rest of the people are going to have to reorient themselves a little bit to find something, because specifically restaurants, it's like restaurants are not built to social distance, period. Bars, restaurants, no. Restaurants, most of them don't even make it. And so now you're telling them to social distance and only have 30 to 40% of their revenue. No restaurant will be able to survive in that atmosphere. Right. So it's like, how long can they sustain on the PPP loans? That's going to dry up very soon. And the PPP loans have created all sorts of like ridiculous incentives, like things like, hey, I need to now hire back other people that like even a lower wage, because I fired them or something happened. And, or, hey, I'm going to like I'm hearing some stories about people that are saying, hey, I'm trying to get people like, I've heard from the airlines. I don't know. It's kind of anecdotal, but rumors of people saying that, hey, I'm now being treated very badly so that I'll quit my job. And so that the company gets to keep their PPP loan. So it's like they just push this stuff in so quickly, and all these incentives that were made. But yeah, I mean, to kind of get back to your point a little bit, everyone's going to need to learn something new, and the economy is going to need to change. And these, that's the only bad thing about propping up like the zombie economy, like we did in 2008, is that there's not as much innovation. Sure, there's innovation and there's people that come out of it, but the point of these rises and falls are to really innovate and come
Yeah.
up with a new way, and it catapults us into this new way of working and living. I mean, we've solved the traffic problem, right?
Yeah.
No one ever thought we'd ever solve a traffic problem. How do you solve that? Never. Like Elon's been just busting his ass trying to figure it out. And finally it's like, oh, hey, what if we just like stayed at home a little bit? Because we don't need to be going to the office. It's like, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, and kind of on that point, like there's been different companies or sorry, countries and cities that have implemented those sort of things. Like you can't drive into the city on certain days or whatever. And yeah, this is just an accelerated, version of that overall. Yeah. I think that, to a point that you made earlier about like propping up like the airlines and things like that, is that, yeah, maybe some of them did have to fail because it's going to sound messed up to say, but like they're just not needed anymore, right? And so meaning like if less people are going to travel, and so you're propping up a zombie thing, and so instead of perhaps investing in the tools or resources that are needed to go to this next level. And so it's hard, I don't have the answers, and obviously we can't figure this out. You and I are not going to solve this, but it is definitely fun to talk about. I just wish that yeah, and perhaps it's because we're startup people, right, that have built companies and have gone without pay for long periods of time, and like not known where money is coming from. Like to me, that's why it feels so crazy also, right? It's like, can't you just like figure this out, right? Can't you just like try to figure something out within yourself? So yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
no,
see.
I think it's a good point. And, it's like we're always trying, as an entrepreneur, you're always just trying to solve things. You're trying to solve problems almost to like a point that's like too much. It's
Yeah.
like whenever I remember talking to my sister a long time ago, and she came to me with a problem, and I'm just like, well, try this, try this, try this. She's try this. And she's like, I just want you to listen. I want
Yeah,
you to hear what I have to say. And that was actually a pretty valuable lesson too, because it's like, you get more of the story before you're kind of jumping to a conclusion of how to solve
sure.
something. But it's like, I think in this world, in all of these changes, this is a psychological thing for a lot of people that no one ever thought. I mean, like people don't even remember the Australian wildfires. Like that happened this year. Like it was only like 65 days ago, so it's
Totally.
like it slammed everyone with this
Yeah.
new, what do we do? And so it's like, you just have to get it out. And I think it's important.
Yeah, we thought we were going to go to a war with Iran. Like that's not happening. It's just crazy. Yeah, totally
A
different.
lot changed.
Man, well, Joe, this has been a great conversation. Question I want to end with is one that I ask everybody, and that is, what question do you have that you would like to ask our listeners that they can think about as they go about their day?
Just about their day.
Or just in life lesson, anything. What kind of question do you have for them?
Well, tell me what's the demographic of the listener, and then I can curtail that.
Anything tech, finance, and people like you and me. How about that?
Well, maybe I'll leave one for maybe some of the little bit younger crowd, especially with the kids that are coming out of college right now, or maybe kids that don't even want to go back to college because they don't want to spend the money and waste it on like e-learning, and they're losing out on the experience. I would say really think about risk, and how, a lot of people are like, hey, I want to get a good job. I want to do this and I want to get a career. Really think about starting your own thing. And especially when you're younger, and identifying that, there's a lot less risk involved than you think. And the reward on the other side of creating something, I mean, you're going to learn more in a year of trying to do your own thing than most people learn in 5, 6, 7 years of working at a company, just doing one thing. And so even if it happens that you need to go get a job after that, you're going to be heads and shoulders above all the other candidates. And people are really going to love the fact that you're an entrepreneur and that you tried something, because they know that you're open-minded, you're going to listen, you're trying to figure stuff out. So I would just say, really think about risk, and really, and feel that, you're going to need a lot less money when you're a little bit younger, and you're going to kind of waver, and you can sleep on couches and you can do all these other things. So I would say, just think about an idea. You know, Shopify is, like you mentioned earlier, it's like you can spin up a product for $60 a month or less, you know, in
Hmm.
45 days. You don't even need to make the product, just design it and put it out there. Do a Kickstarter, do anything, and you're going to learn. So I would say that's my advice to everyone.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's your your tolerance for risk usually for most people goes down as you age, right? Because you have more responsibility and so forth. So
Which it shouldn't.
I don't think you should either, but for most people it definitely does.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, Joe, what are some good ways that people can stay in touch with you or follow you and so forth?
I would say just follow us at Lunar Crush on Twitter or lunarcrush.com. It's free to sign up right now. It's going to be free. You know, all the tools that we have will be free forever. So don't worry. It's like we're going to add some other cool stuff that eventually you have to pay for, but what you see is what you get. So go sign up for Lunar Crush.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of the TF podcast. Again, please make sure that you are subscribed across our various channels and also make sure that you're following us at TF Blockchain as well as myself at JG Product. If you like this episode, please make sure to fill in those stars. It goes a long way as we continue to get up the podcast charts, and love it if you could share with your friends and family. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you all soon.